So my name's Alan Nunn. Many of you will know me probably from my days at BT. Spent a long time at BT at Astral Park before I left to join CGI about 7 years ago. So we'll be talking about innovation in action with my colleague Doug, who's actually from the space world. So we'll be talking about some quite interesting stuff about what we're doing there with 5G. Rough agenda, I'll be talking a little bit about CGI itself, and then moving on to how we work with our partners and how we do innovation in that context. A little bit about what we do, the sorts of things we do, and then hand over to Doug to talk about the 5G Years project, and then back to me for a summary at the end. Okay, so about CGI first then. So CGI, I describe CGI as a 45-year-old family company. We were founded back then, and it was a classic IT company founded by a guy and his mate in the garage. And that guy, Serge Godin, is still our chairman on the company today. So it's family owned. It's not public. Well, it is publicly listed, but the family own a majority of the shares. And it's very much a company that encourages our own ownership. So most of the members, the employees of the company, are shareholders. And the reason that's important is we believe that makes a real difference to quality. There's an expression that nobody bothers cleaning a hire car before you return it, and it just gives it that much more sense of ownership into the company. So we've got about 88,000 consultants and professionals around the world. About 5,500 of those are in the UK. So we actually have quite a strong UK presence. Many of you will remember Logica from which disappeared off the scene about 10 years ago. The reason it disappeared is that Logica and CGI merged, and the CGI brand was taken then. So that's the sort of history of the company. We operate in about 40 countries, 400 locations. We've got about a dozen locations across the UK. And we pride ourselves in quality. We deliver our projects on time. We have high customer satisfaction feedback. So that's really about CGI, just to give a bit of a pen picture. The other thing, we're very committed to a sustainable and equal world. So we are committed to science-based targets to get to net zero in 2030, and we are achieving that as we go with things moving along. We're also big on equality. So we have our UK president is a lady, and we have a third of our presidents working under that who are women as well. So we have a strong equality drive in the company, and we obviously encourage that throughout what we do. We do a lot of work with partners, and that's really why this is very relevant to the membership of Innovation Martlesham. We have a proximity model that we use, and if I just sort of take a little bit of time walking around this model, the first thing we do is we try and embed innovation in everything we do. It's a competitive marketplace out there as for a system integrator or somebody providing services into the IT industry. So we use innovation as a key differentiator, and every bid we put out, we'll make sure there's a strong innovation thread to it. Slightly different context to the sort of innovation that maybe BT talks about, which is much more cutting edge. To us, innovation is just doing things better, and it might mean integrating some new technology, but fundamentally it's about doing things better and making things better for our clients. And to do that, we listen to our clients. We do this voice of our clients survey every year, and we go out to all of our clients. It goes out to about 1,400 executives every year, and the insights coming back from that inform our program, and that's constantly reviewed as well. And out of that, we create a network of emerging technology practices, where we really focus in on some of those key things. Over the past few years, we've been looking like AI, at the metaverse, at 5G private networks, the new trends in data, and what can you do with data? How does visualization get used in a more imaginative way? Things like that. So real tangible things that we can then embed in innovation as it moves forward. We then have created a number of innovation centres and labs. We've got a 5G lab down in our office in London. We're based in the Fenchurch Street Walkie Talkie building, which is always great for a visit. Sky Garden's brilliant. So that's one of our labs that we have, and we actually built a metaverse capability in that lab, so that people who through the pandemic, we've used that to onboard new members to the company, and they get to walk around that physical environment but virtually, and meet the leadership team there, who are also there virtually. So that was a piece of innovation that we put in play over the last couple of years to improve how we work. We run this ICE program, Innovate, Collaborate and Evolve, which is a formalized way of embedding that innovation mindset into the company. And the output of that is additional intellectual property. We're quite a strong company on intellectual property. We have a number of our own propositions that we pull together that we then use with clients, and then of course we embed that in at the point of delivery. So that's basically how we do innovation. So it's quite a structured process, but quite flexible in that as well. In terms of what we do, we actually work across 10 major sectors, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see the sort of people we work with. We do a lot with big brands. We tend to work with larger companies rather than smaller ones. You can see in the communications world there, we work with most of the UK players, and a lot across the world. Our biggest client is actually Bell Canada. We run something like a third of their IT capability as an outsourced service, and have done for about the last 25 years. So we have very, very long relationships with our customers. I think we've been working with BT, through the Logica brand and through CGI for probably the last 30 years. Those of you who can remember CSS, that was built by Logica. So that's how far it goes back. Energy and utilities, the big claim to fame there is Datacom's company, that is the company that provides the capability that sits behind smart metering. So if you have a smart meter in your home, that data goes back to a central capability that we have built and we operate for the DCC. We do a lot of government stuff that I can't really talk about in detail, but we have a very strong security capability. We have an innovation centre down in the southwest near Gloucester, and we do a lot in health and life sciences as well. Largely outside of the UK, but we are bringing that heavily into the UK, and we're starting to get some traction with UK trusts there now. And on the second page of it, extending from financial services, we do insurance. So when you answer those questions about have you ever had a prang, and have you been disqualified by driving when you do your insurance renewal, that comes back to the motor insurance database, which is another one we run back in the middle of the network there. Manufacturing, we do a lot in that space. Airbus in France is one of our big clients. Retail and consumer services, again, largely France centered. Transport and logistics all over the world, and space is the other interesting one. We do a lot of work with satellite companies, and that's actually Douglas's background. So I will not say much more about that. I will instead hand over to Douglas to talk about 5Genius.
Good morning. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, good morning, Martel Sherma, and good morning everyone at home online. Yeah, I'm Doug Hudson, and I've been a technical lead at CGI for the last 27 years now, coming up. 5Genius project. Sorry, step on the slide. 5Genius stands for 5G Enhanced Navigation Integrity for UAV Systems. So it's a project where we've put 5G together with drones to develop a navigation system. I like the name 5Genius because there were 5 of us actually working on that project. In this brief talk, I'll be covering why we did the project, what the motivations were, an overview of what we've attempted to get to in terms of product and the current status for that, and finally, the market potential. So first of all, why do we look at drones? Well, there's a massive potential for market potential for drones, not just in the UK, but internationally, particularly Europe, the Far East and the US. And it's predicted to be multi-billion-dollar business, especially from the 2030s onward. And the reason for that is because of the sort of industrial efficiencies it could bring, and the societal improvements it can bring. And there's some of those use cases are listed down the right-hand side of the screen there. However, today, the main thing you'll see drones being used for is aerial photography. And I've got nothing against that, but it's quite limited. And the reason it's limited is that those users can only operate the drone within their line of sight, the visual line of sight. And all of those sort of enhanced use cases where we can get the real value from drones open up if you can operate drones beyond the visual line of sight. But to do that, you need to be able to show that you can do that safely and with aviation levels of safety as well. So on this project, we've looked at one of the technological enablers needed for that safe flight beyond the visual line of sight. And in particular, the assured positioning is the focus of this project. But the other enablers that you potentially need to have are detect and avoid. So this is because the drone is beyond the visual line of sight. The remote pilot doesn't have the same view as a pilot on board the drone or aircraft would have. So we need some automatic way to avoid other airspace users. And datacomms is the other thing. So resilient high rate datacomms needs to be reliable just in case the pilot needs to take over control of the drone. But our focus for this project is the assured positioning, and the motivation for that is because GPS or GNSS on its own, while it works, is great, but in urban environments in particular, it's not sufficient to meet aviation safety standards, and that's because of the interference and the obscured view to satellites where you've got tall buildings. So we looked at 5G. Why 5G? Well, there's lots of potential benefits for 5G as sorry. 5G has many potential benefits as a complementary technology to GNSS. So, for example, it's operating over multiple bands, and those signals are strong, much stronger than GNSS. So it's harder to jam, it's harder to spoof. Those multiple bands provide resilience to jamming. It's operated by multiple operators. So if you think about that, actually, that would provide cyber resilience. Be a lot harder to do a cyber attack and bring all of those down. It's also deploying. So can we take advantage of all of those 5G cells that are rolling out? And to date, the focus for that rollout has been in urban areas. And this is just those areas where we need that complementary technology for GNSS. So does that rollout provide an opportunity? Looking at the technology, so 5G has clocks. Those base stations have clocks inside, which are there to provide inter-cell synchronization to stop those cells interfering with each other. But to be suitable for positioning, we really need those clocks to be fully synchronized. And if they're not synchronized, well, how stable are the clocks? Can we actually make predictions of how they're going to behave over the next 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds to provide a correction to users that will synchronize those clocks? And finally, the deployment that we're seeing, it's deployed to serve data communications to ground users. So is that coverage going to extend into the air for airborne users? And is the geometry of that coverage suitable for positioning? So on this project, we wanted to examine those questions, and yeah, so we actually built a proof of concept to examine that on this project. So this graphic that you can see here is illustrating the concept for the eventual system. On board the drone there, we have a hybrid positioning module on board, which is taking ranging measurements from the nearby 5G cells, as well as the GNSS satellites, and it's fusing these to generate position and velocity and time for the drone. And as the navigation solution is computed in the UAV as opposed to the UAV being positioned by the network. This allows the solution to scale with increasing numbers of UAVs. You can also see there's a support data server, and this is providing inputs to the positioning process, such as, well, where are those 5G antennas and what are the cell IDs they correspond to, as well as other data that would aid generation of integrity estimates for the navigation solution. And by that, I mean, how much can you rely on the solution? How confident are you in it? So the system we envisage, it's compatible with all 5G release 15 base stations, so as deployed, as well as ones foreseeable at later 5G versions. And being compatible with the current technology rollout, that simplifies our route to market and accelerates technology penetration rate. It's a passive system as well, so our positioning technology is not transmitting, and that takes away the problem of radio licensing, or part of that problem. As the UAV is not connected to the network as 5G user equipment, it can effectively use 5G signals from all of the mobile network operators concurrently. And this is where you get that resilience against radio frequency interference, because there's so many diverse frequency bands, and that cyber resilience as well. The 5G transmitters are below the UAV and the GNSS satellites are above. So the addition of the 5G measurements into the positioning should improve the geometry, and that's true, especially for vertical accuracy. And we actually performed some simulations which confirmed this, and we demonstrated this actually. So theoretically, a significant benefit again from having these 5G measurements when the UAV has part of the sky occluded by tall buildings. And if GNSS were lost completely, those 5G measurements would allow positioning to continue, at least horizontally. So that's the concept. I recently met Sophie James, who is the head of telecoms and spectrum policy at Tech UK. And when I explained what we have done with 5G for positioning drones, she exclaimed, "That's genius." And I said, "No, that's 5 genius." So as I said, we had a demonstration for the project centered around UAV flight trials, and the objectives of that were to understand the diversity of the transmitters and the relative strength of the 5G signals received at the different altitudes we're flying the drone at and on the different operating bands, and we called that the discovery objective. And the other objective was to capture the 5G and GNSS signals in an environment that may be representative for drones flying in urban and suburban areas, enabling the potential benefits of using GNSS and 5G signals for navigation to be understood. And that was the proof of concept objective. And to be able to prove that concept, we've built a subset of this system, this envisaged system. So we developed a functional 5G signal processing algorithm that generates pseudo-range carrier phase and carrier to noise density ratio measurements from the 5G waveform data. We developed a hybrid positioning algorithm that fuses 5G and GNSS measurements. And we actually developed a measurement noise and clock model characterization algorithm that would eventually form part of the support data service. So, as I said, we are doing or have been conducting flight trials using real 5G base stations. We did this in Morden Park, which is near Wimbledon in London. We chose that area because it had a drone flying field, and it was safe to fly a drone there. And as you can see, our drone was pretty big, but it also had 5G coverage. So that rollout of 5G moving out from the centre of London had sort of reached the suburbs, and we did have several 5G cells within range. Just on the left there, you can see our setup. So multiple GNSS antennas on the drone, our 5G antenna, and our payload, which inside had the GNSS receivers and our software-defined radio, which we were using to gather up the RF waveforms on the 5G bands. And that data went back for processing at our offices in Leatherhead. So looking next at the results, so we actually showed quite effectively that when hybridizing with 5G in challenging conditions for GNSS, there's definitely a benefit to gain, significant improvement, especially in GNSS conditions that were challenging. So the graphs that you see here is the horizontal and vertical error of a moving receiver moving at ground level actually through a town. And there were several times during that journey where the GNSS signals were lost, and that corresponded to points on the journey where there were tall buildings, or there was even a tunnel at one point. In the air, so on the drone, so we did see cells as far away as 3 kilometers once we got above the tree line and the building line, and that one finding was the coverage was a bit patchy there. So definitely the 5G deployment is optimized for users at ground level, and going forward we'd need a coverage map to understand where you can expect to get coverage in the sky. But the signal processing worked very effectively, and we were able, when we had a clear line of sight to a transmitter, to get very clean measurements that were comparable to GNSS measurements, so suitable, so showing potential for positioning with 5G as well as GNSS. This slide signposts some of the ideas we have for taking this technology forwards. First of all, we want to continue developing this capability for the drone market. We're already in early talks with a chip manufacturer about how we can shrink what we've done down in size, weight, and power. And as well as pursuing drone navigation, the same technology lends itself to autonomy in road vehicles and ships as well, where there will be similar needs for assured positioning. 5G today cannot be used for datacomms by drones, but we've seen signs that Ofcom and the Civil Aviation Authority are considering this. So cellular for drones would be great for opening up a new market for mobile network operators. And then serving airborne users would improve the coverage that we get for navigating. Before we can achieve that, there's another technical problem, which is that we have to locate all the cell antennas with sufficient accuracy. So we did get some help from BT and some other mobile network operators in the area of the park, but they only had those cell locations down to the nearest building, so not very accurate, and we'd want to survey those antennas across the whole area that we want to fly the drones, so we have accurate positions. And we're talking to a couple of mobile network operators about that, including BT. And finally, 5G private networks can be deployed, and we're seeing increasing cases of that. This is serving specific users, like hospitals, for example, and could be deployed for drone corridors. So with full control of that deployment, the deployment could consider the needs for navigation as well as communications. For example, we envisage 5G support along drone highways, and at hospitals, 5G could be used to enable seamless transition from outdoor to indoor navigation. And with that, I will hand you back to my colleague, Alan.
Yeah, so hopefully that's shown you that CGI has got some really strong capability. Yeah, we do have global capability in addition to that group in the UK. We have people across the world to help with specialist areas. And part of what we do is help smaller companies to scale out. And yeah, we find ourselves doing business with larger companies that actually want to see that innovation and want the engagement of smaller companies who've perhaps got a very niche solution to a problem. So we do that kind of work. We've outlined our innovation approach and just taken you through that example of drone navigation there, which was a need that's been identified. We've worked with a bunch of partners, including ESA, to develop something that can be proven. And we are now in that next stage of looking at how we can work with our clients. You know, we are actually talking with autonomous vehicle providers to look at that. And as Douglas said, we're looking at how private networks can help with that as well. Yeah, we are having a lot of discussions with people about private networks. It's still quite early days, and you know, the dilemma there is will the public 5G coverage be sufficient, or do people need to build out private networks? So yeah, indoor coverage is a classic use case there. So that is it from us. I will hand back to Jim now, who will help us with questions. I can see there's a couple of things landed in the chat there already. So that's our contact details. Please do get in touch if you want to follow up on anything specific. And otherwise, back to Jim.